Hi, I'm Sam from Tarot for Writing, and I'm so excited you're here. Today we're going to talk about the next card in the suit of wands, the Knight of Wands. Look at him and his horse charging ahead at full speed. So as usual, if you're familiar with this series, we're going to take a quick look at what the card means. Again, this is just my personal interpretation of this card. Your opinions may vary. Then I'm going to zero in on a detail. And last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about how I would read or use a card like this in my fiction writing. So let's dive right in. So the definition, this is about charging into a project or a situation at full steam ahead. It's about thriving on challenges, being competitive. I see a lot of potential in this card, and uncontrolled creative energy. So where the page that we looked at yesterday, in case you missed that video, reminded me of the Fool, this energy reminds me of the Chariot. So think about Chariot, but with the addition of the creative, fiery energy that is so much the suit of wands. And like in the page, we see the 3 pyramids again, but today I chose to zero in on a different little detail. So let's move right into that. And today what caught my attention are the salamanders on the knight's tunic. It's a little hard to see on the screen here, but if you have a copy of any of the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot cards, go find the Knight of Wands and take a look at his tunic here and the salamanders on there. Some of them look like the salamander is just about to reach the tail, but in most of them he's not quite there. So they're really not forming complete circles, which is something we'll see later on in the King of Wands. But the salamanders on his tunic are trying their best. They're trying their hardest. So why salamanders? Salamanders are actually a symbol of fire. And like I said, here they are close to forming a ring, symbolizing completion, but they're not quite there yet. So what this says to me is that our knight, the archetype that represents this card, is trying very hard to master a skill or racing to the finish line, expanding a lot of energy in the pursuit, but he's not quite there yet. So these salamanders are trying very hard to contort themselves into a complete circle, but they can't quite manage it yet. It reminds me a little bit of yoga and stretching. If you're trying to take on certain poses and you're so close, you can almost taste it, but you're not quite there yet. So that's kind of the energy I get from the wand, but that it's also one of trying very hard, moving full steam ahead, doing things very fast, very impulsively, maybe even a little bit too fast, which kind of leads us nicely into our discussion about how I would use this card in my fiction writing. I sometimes pull cards to help me create characters for my novels, but I also use them to kind of sprinkle some interest throughout the story. And of course, I also pull cards and do little spreads when I'm stuck in a particular chapter or a certain part in the story. So let's talk about what this card might mean in any of those instances, starting with the character. So this makes me think of somebody who is very headstrong, a fiery character, who is easy to anger, somebody with a flaring temper, or just someone who has any kind of an emotional outburst, somebody who wears their heart on their sleeve, who is quick to be overjoyed and quick to be angered as well. And then like the page, probably because of the pyramids that we're seeing here and this whole sense of adventure, it makes me think of another traveler or an adventurer. But unlike the page, with this one, what I'm feeling is that the character really craves speed and adrenaline. It is not somebody to take a leisurely train ride somewhere. They're racing, they're flying, they're driving a speedboat, that kind of energy. It also makes me think of an athlete, where the page kind of made me think more of a musician touring the world. This makes me think more of an athlete that travels all over the place to compete. It also makes me think of somebody who's into extreme sports or a daredevil. And again, all of that just from the energy I see in this card, the way the knight sits on the horse, the way the horse is moving quickly, ready to take off racing. And then if I'm pulling this card while I'm working on a chapter or working on the idea or outline for a story, this might be a good indication for me that I need to pick up the pace, or at the very least include some action to kind of make the story feel faster and make it a little bit more exciting. So if this was an action movie, it might be time for a car chase. And who knows, I might have one of those in one of my books one day as well. It could also be, since I write romance novels, it could also be about falling head over heels for each other and jumping into a marriage quickly. And then only after the ceremony and the celebration, trying to figure out how these two are going to make that work. Kind of like the whole insta-love thing that we talked about in one of the previous videos. This also makes me think of somebody where maybe somewhere in the story, the character acts first and asks questions later. Giving in to impulsion or to impulse and kind of maybe not thinking things through, acting on instinct, that kind of thing. It also makes me think of somebody who has a gut reaction or maybe an overreaction. Something happens. They see their loved one, their partner in distress, and they rush off and overreact, putting the whole relationship or some sort of other external storyline in jeopardy. That kind of thing. It also makes me think of somebody who tends to be jealous, so that could add a nice element of tension to the story. Maybe they have a history that would explain that jealousy. Maybe somebody broke their heart before or went behind their back, that kind of thing. So a character that's showing a little jealousy, and then the need for him and his love interest to find a way to work through that to where they can build that trust that's required by a long-term loving relationship. And then last but not least, he's a knight. He's a knight in shining armor on a horse, right? So he could be rushing off to someone's rescue, or maybe she rescues him. That would be another fun twist. I think I used that in one of my novels where she comes to his rescue when he has a flat tire, that kind of thing. So lots of fun ideas to play with. We didn't even really get into the color symbolism or anything else here. I think I mentioned this before, that I kind of pull a lot of inspiration based on what's going on in the story. One last thing, just as I was looking at the card in the screen here, is the red feathers that are streaming out of the top of his helmet. And then it looks like, I can't tell if they're on the back of his arm, but I'm thinking maybe they're on the back of his tunic or poking out of the armor he's wearing under the tunic. But it looks like a trail of flames, doesn't it? So that would be fun to come up with some ideas of how could a character metaphorically leave a trail of flames behind as they race off, as they move through somebody's life, that kind of thing. So lots of fun stuff to dig into here. I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the Knight of Wands. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'd love to have you, and we will continue our journey through every card in the tarot deck. So eventually this playlist, the playlist by the way is Tarot Deep Dives, will have 78 videos. I'm hoping to wrap that up before the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. But either way, we'll move on through the rest of the suit of wands over the next couple of days, and I'll hope to see you there.